I thought of you as the first person to talk to about Prince Philip because growing up in England as a teenager, when your father was High Commissioner, you had some dealings with the royal family then, so you've probably known them longer than any other Australian. Tell us about Prince Philip and your take on what really was an exceptional life.
Well, first of all, he was a very dutiful kind of person. So I think if you look at his record overall, this is somebody who put duty before himself, whereas now there's a bit of a bit more practice to put people's selves before anybody else. But he was very dutiful. I think the second thing to say about him is he was fairly matter of fact. He was very blunt. He would say exactly what he thought. I mean, I was sitting with him and at Australia House in 2017, where he was part of the launch of a program on the Great Barrier Reef that had been produced by Sir David Attenborough. And we were waiting for Sir David Attenborough, and Sir David Attenborough was late and something went wrong with the arrangements. And I said to him, "Well, sir, what would you like to do to fill in the minutes?" And he said, "Well, it's your bloody show, so you decide what to do." You know, he was to the point, if I could put it that way. It was indeed my bloody show, so I did have to fill in time. And it was interesting because we had quite a discussion about the environment, and he had a different take on climate change and environmental challenges by saying that the biggest single problem we face is this inexorable growth in global population, but nobody ever wants to talk about it. And I must admit, it made me think it's a very interesting point, and it is true. Environmental campaigners don't talk about the impact of population growth. Also,
small families living in big houses would have a pretty big carbon footprint too. But tell us about, you had the honour, the duty, speaking of duty, when you were High Commissioner, of handing to Prince Philip, of conferring on him the knighthood that Tony Abbott as Prime Minister had conferred on him. Hugely controversial. Tony Abbott wrote about that decision on the weekend in the wake of the Duke of Edinburgh's death. Can you tell us about that ceremony and what his reaction to it was?
So there you can see the photograph of the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh and me, and the insignia. The Queen actually formally handed the insignia to him, she being the Chancellor of the Order. But I mean, I was obviously present there. Well, I think he appreciated the fact that he had been awarded a knighthood of the Order of Australia, and the affection he assumed that reflected towards him in Australia, though of course the knighthood itself was incredibly controversial. It was quite unpopular, I think, if I remember at the time. And I did tell him that it had been very controversial.
Was he embarrassed at all by it?
No, he wasn't embarrassed. But I think on the contrary, he is a hugely experienced man by then. And his response was, "Oh, these controversies blow away over time."
Now we've only got
it blew Tony Abbott away as well, I suppose you could say. So
it
didn't blow away for everybody, but it did blow away for him.
We've only got about a minute to go. I wonder what you might think about the Queen now. I mean, she's obviously had Prince Philip there as that private support while she sort of manages a huge workload and onerous responsibilities, a bit of a wayward family. It's going to be much more difficult for her without that person to share all those private traumas with.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Obviously, we feel very much for her at this time, losing her husband of so many years. She has depended very heavily over all of those years on his advice and his wisdom. And of course, as time's gone on, his huge experience. So in that one respect, I mean, in many other respects as well, but in that one respect, she will miss him hugely. It'll leave a great hole in her life. So very sad for her. And I mean, she's 94, nearly 95, right? So it'll be very hard for her.